Today's video is about what happens when politicians and idiots decide to make laws and rules about things, sabotaging people who actually know what they're doing and not getting the fuck out of our way. Just like me and everybody else told you that you wanted net neutrality, and now you're soaking in a lack of it. And we were right and you were all wrong, and you still won't knuckle under and say, yes, Daddy, you're right. Sorry, I just had to throw that in. I'm very vindictive about being told I don't know what I'm talking about when I do. And net neutrality should have been a law. And I don't give a damn if any of you are mad about that. I don't care. You listen to propaganda instead of geeks. Geeks don't have any reason to give you any propaganda. We're trying to solve a problem. Now we're going to talk about right to repair versus tree hugger, woke, all the other shit people scream because they have cognitive dissonance, because they want to be a cognitive dissident, and well, they use thought-terminating cliches as propaganda. Just because Hillary Clinton breathes air doesn't mean you should hold your breath and die. Okay? Okay. We're going to talk about e-waste and right to repair. But we're not supposed to cross the streams. Yeah, I know. So let's talk about the capacitor disaster. In the year 2001, we have a record of this happening, but it happened before that. Luminous Town Electric Company in China got a hold of a poorly copied formula for a chemical compound called an electrolyte that's used in capacitors. And this is an example of industrial espionage or somebody just going to the library and writing down the wrong formula. An electrolyte, if you're not aware of it, is something where if you expose it to an electric charge between two metal sheets or bars or whatever, or they could be dissimilar metals too, that's another option. It causes a chemical reaction in the electrolyte that has the effect of creating a voltage. Now, if you're not aware of it, that can be induced by putting a charge on it and causing the chemical change, or you can have a chemical change that produces electricity. You know, like a battery. Okay. Now, as you're aware of, a lot of you are already aware, battery chemicals, it's also sometimes called an electrolyte as well, have the ability to etch metal and cause chemical reactions, like electroplating things. These processes drift into dozens of different technologies, and the idea is to keep them in a sweet spot. But if you don't write down the fucking formula correctly, you're going to end up with a problem. So anyway, Luminous Town Electric Company got a copy of this formula that was wrong from a company called Rubycon Corporation of Japan. They either got it or stole it from a scientist. Then that bad formula was then industrial espionage stolen, and that copy of the information went to a Taiwan company that produced faulty capacitors. These were used in personal computers, on motherboards, video cards, power supplies, and I'm going to interrupt this news story. Literally every other fucking thing. It was just all capacitors. They're the can kind of capacitors that either have two leads sticking out of the bottom or one out of each end. And also, it extended into this chemical formula being copied verbatim for years until 2007 when it was ridiculously over the top exposed as being a big problem. They had a very high failure rate, and it was called the capacitor plague of Taiwan. Aluminum electrolytic capacitors with faulty electrolyte composition in them would cause corrosion and gas generation because they were doing an electrolytic reaction, but they were really just electroplating the metal on the inside to the bar or vice versa, depending on the voltage and bias and construction. Now, in 2003, The Independent broke that story. Meanwhile, long-suffering Waptec here doing the solder jobs on all of the sound cards and video cards and motherboards and modems and radios and TV sets and monitors, oh my, including the high-voltage ones that would cause your house to burn down. Sitting there, do I take out the multimeter, somehow test the capacitor without having to remove it from the circuit board, which means desoldering it, or do I just recap the whole goddamn thing? Well, there'll be signs that there's something wrong. No, there wasn't. There really wasn't. The bulging capacitors and stuff, that actually is not what really happened. They would look completely normal. You pull all the capacitors. If it has a time and date stamp, oh, that's right, they don't time and date stamp them. Now capacitors are not legally required to, but virtually all of them have a year of production stamped in them that's just clearly the century and year, 2015. It'll just tell you the year. Fucking just give us the bare minimum. A 4-digit code so we can tell, is it crap or is it Memorax, okay? All right. I don't have flashbacks. I'm okay. You're the one who's freaking out. I'm not crying. Now, really. I had to build solder tips because they would chemically etch the soldering points apart to hit the 2 pins, God help me if it was something complicated, for the capacitor. I would clean it up, chemically strip the surface, power it on with the test voltage to make sure the polarity is actually correct, and then put in a brand new cap that didn't have this problem from a company that didn't use this formula. Once the story broke, it was actually 2004 approximately, when it was really understood. But before that, we just said, hi, yeah, do you have the good or bad caps? If they said anything other, yeah, we had bad caps, we don't have them anymore, or no, we only have the good caps, we know which ones are bad. If they said, what bad caps? Immediately blacklisted. These companies went out of business because they weren't being honest. I don't want to hear about your old stock. If you have old stock bad caps, sell them as bad caps at half price and fucking stop lying to me. I don't want a fire hazard. On the power supplies in your computer, the capacitors are this fucking big. It's like a 4-gauge shotgun shell. It's like something you would use to blast cement size of a shotgun shell. But no, it's just an electrolyte. What could go wrong? If you're not aware of the orientation for the circuit boards and stuff in a lot of the power supplies, there's 2 main ones. Circuit board here with a capacitor on top of it gravitationally, or it hanging upside down. And then you tip the computer on its side if it's a desktop computer where you have the tradition of putting the monitor on it. Which means it's sitting like that, and it's oozing, dripping, and chemically changing things. And guess what else happens? The chemical reaction changes its composition into composition 475, and it just burns like a freaking flare. I'm okay. But anyway, oh, and by the way, it's toxic. You remove all the capacitors and remake it. So people bring in a computer. I want to recycle the old parts. Do you guarantee recycling? And I would pipe off, no. I remove the parts that are bad, resell them, and we recycle only parts that are useful but are not working in the current state. Do you want a complex answer, or do you want me to lie to you? And then they'd shut up. You signed the contract, and because you announced yourself that way, you've been audio-video recorded, because I know you're going to be fictitiously litigant, and you're probably an activist. I hate activists. That's when I learned to hate activists. Actually, many things have caused me to hate activists. And I tell people, you're not allowed to sue us, and you're going to acknowledge it. And you're on audio-video recording. And if you're thinking of doing this, it won't work. And we sue you because you're agreeing to it for $40,000. It went up to $100,000 when we got someone who actually tried to pull this shit. Now it's $100,000. It's called the asshole fee. Because it was never about fixing a problem. It's about, you know what it is. You look at Twitter. I'm not freaking out. So let's talk about Europe. Europe gets pushed in their face like a hot dog in that meme about how they're better than everybody in the United States. So, per capita, per year, annus capitis, per person per year, in Europe, each person is responsible for around 40 pounds of crap that's considered electronic waste or e-waste. That's 17.6 kilograms in commie units. 7.5 kilograms is actually collected and recycled and documented as such. Some of it's undocumented as being recycled. Some of it's pulled from the trash system aggressively, so it isn't thrown in the trash because it's still useful. Stop throwing it away. So they actually do something about it. Wow, you're actually fixing a problem? Just shutting up? Wow. That means 42 or 43% annual average rate of recycling in one study. Except it then has caveats and yabbits and ums in it, and oopses. Mismanagement of e-waste. How much crap does it cause? 120 million tons a year, is that metric tons or freedom tons, of raw material out of the recovered material is either released as pollution or not recovered and ends up going to the trash. That's still pollution, guys. Or it's recovered, but it ends up being waste product that's filtered out by resmelting the material and then them forwarding it and getting it recycled anyway. So we don't really know. And this includes lead, barium, beryllium, cadmium, mercury, dioxins, all sorts of crap. Okay. This is done by a process of collecting things, sorting them, dismantling them, removing anything hazardous, batteries, bad caps, mechanically separating them parts, and or shredding them. Some things like circuit boards, I know how to mechanically separate a circuit board into layers and get 100% recovery, but it'll end up with contaminated copper that has to be reprocessed, and it'll produce silver, tin, and lead. They can be reused. And the fiberglass, well, it's going to be contaminated too, and it can't be used for things that have to be guaranteed high voltage compliant because it's contaminated. And also, it can't be used for anything other than making more circuit boards. And by the time I'm done with it, it's more expensive than the raw fiberglass. So what it does is you melt it, because it's fiberglass, they just melt it down and make it into industrial use glasses like insulators. Because they can then filter it to make it high grade, and guess what they use it for? They then respin it to fiberglass anyway and remake it to make circuit boards half the time anyway. So it gets almost 100% recycling, but at each stage, it looks like I'm a bastard not doing a good job. And the chemicals that are stripped out of it by using basically paint thinner to get rid of the binder also can be recycled. That you send it off as waste, well, I failed, and then they recycle it anyway and turn it right back into the same material. If it's done right, a bunch of people, through greed alone, do a good job. But it's not documented very well. Is that on purpose or not? Then they ship it out to be processed at recycling places, otherwise known as the smelter. You know, the place where they take the bauxite to make aluminum. I think that's the material. They also just take in the raw aluminum and remelt it. They have better facilities for reprocessing it. The evil overlord corporations that do all the smelting, they smelt it from literal dirt. So you give them essentially clean aluminum, they're going to do a better job. You're not going to do as good a job as they are. If you're trying to help the earth, you're going to be feeding large corporations that are going to be taking advantage of this nearly pure material. They only have to recycle up a little bit, and they're going to sell it for a profit. Let the demons have their due. They have a better job because they're the ones running the furnaces. But, again, long-suffering Wabtec, all I did was change out caps and resell them and so that everybody could have the bleeps and bloops come out when they're playing Doom. That's all I did. What did I do with the bad caps? They went into the trash because the companies that made the capacitors literally said, we don't want the bad capacitors in here. We'll be tempted to recycle them, and they'll just contaminate everything because it would contaminate the aluminum, the plastic, the paper, and rubber. It was that bad. They were considered non-hazardous waste, permanent disposal. The couple of companies I found that would recycle them wanted them by the bucket load because they found a way to do it. And they got all the metals out, but then they sent it to a recycler that repurified them, and then even then had to dilute it by mixing it with the other materials like metals and plastics and whatever. So when European Union countries are held up as they're the ideal, but they're only doing 43%, and some of that measurement is actually after the recycling, which means they're still throwing crap away. That's just as bad as the United States for practical reasons, and also because they don't admit that it's 100% recycled. Most glass is 100% recycled. They don't do it in the same stages and they don't keep track of it. Or you can just repair things. Yes, I'm talking about Apple making it against the law for you to repair something so you don't grind it up. Yes, right to repair, just like me and every other geek and expert telling you that you wanted net neutrality because that's the way it should be. Now you're all fucked because you're all tracked. So am I, because of you assholes, right? Right? Please consult geeks before you consult politicians who don't know what they're talking about. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. I wish you all luck with that. And yes, it's not green or woke or whatever. It's profit mongering because we don't have to dig it up out of the ground. We can keep our reserves in the ground and save the whales at the same time just because it makes you look good.